About 7 minutes into this episode, during one of the many trips to the beef bowl spot, Nina will ponder what appears to be the most important question. How does Momoka really feel? I hoped you watched my video on the last episode, because I'm going to reference a lot of what I have already said. One thing was how a collision between Momoka's old and new bands suddenly seemed like a real narrative possibility, whereas before they were just the thing that led her to meet Nina, and part of her past that she didn't want to discuss. This episode, then, nudges that possibility further forward, putting the idea of being in competition with Diamond Dust into words. Mostly Nina's words, mind, but the expansion of the band with newcomers, far more popular than our original trio, jumpstarts the feasibility of doing something that actually resembles competing. And so, again, the question, how does Momoka really feel? Even though Nina is our main point-of-view character, I think it's possible that Momoka's internal crisis might be the more prominent conflict, at least in terms of how it shapes the plot. The climax of this episode involves the other four trying to maneuver around her, planning out how to pitch her on adding new members, or choosing something to aim towards. She is the linchpin of the band, and yet isn't interested in choosing a direction, doesn't think of herself as the leader, and seemingly has not decided how much she wants to invest herself into music this time around. In last week's goals section, I mentioned that it was odd not to have macro goals this far into the story, but that hearing Momoka talk about quitting Diamond Dust was the answer to the omission. She had a goal, fell short, and is seemingly gun-shy about choosing another. You can imagine how amused I was in this episode, then, to have Nina ask her point-blank what her goals are, and, as suspected, she has none. More precisely, I think, she wants to have none. No expectations means no disappointment. So long as she puts nothing she wants into words, she can continue to enjoy making and playing music only to the degree she feels like it from day to day. However, in a contest of wills between those with and without goals, the ones chasing something specific are likely to win out. The problem in our story, then, isn't that the other members have goals, but that the pursuit of them is likely to propel Momoka towards a situation she doesn't want to be in, and she has already quit once when faced with that proposition. If she can give up her band and friends of 3+ years, how much more easily could she ditch these folks she's only known for a piece of a season? At the same time, it seems like the decision to leave Diamond Dust haunts her. So she would likely also want to avoid quitting a band again if she can help it. Momoka is a battleground of wants and regrets, and that final shot of her on the balcony, gazing sadly into the distance, is a haunting one to me. Her turmoil is far from over. I'm going to restate some things I said last episode to make the next part more clear, without restating the reasoning. Momoka's behavior and her version of why she quit leads me to this conclusion. Something about what was asked of Diamond Dust as part of their label deal bothered Momoka more than it bothered the others, even though it seems none of them were keen on being unable to do whatever they wanted. Nobody wanted Momoka to quit, and supposedly staying together was the most important thing for them all. Despite this, Momoka felt quitting was her best option, and the others either wanted the label deal more than they wanted to stay together, or they were already under contract and were willing to put up with more than Momoka would. She was the one least willing to compromise. However, in the time since Momoka followed through on her conviction, she has come to regret it, potentially even doubting whether whatever she believed so important was as important as she believed it. The reality of losing the others and their shared journey has proven a heavier price than expected, and Momoka is thus in a very uncertain place. It's not just about her questioning whether she made the right choice in this specific instance, but a wider crisis around whether she even should care about something so much if it can lead her to this. This is why she can seem of two minds at times, encouraging Nina to speak her truth while trying to avoid her own, pushing Nina to put feelings into the performance while she keeps her own as bottled up as she can, and hounding Nina to join her band while also shrugging off the possibility of losing members. Subaru lays this out directly when she talks about the two Momokas, the one who is dedicated and serious about music, who wants to see if her songs resonate with others, and then the one who comes to her senses, who stepped down from music once already and wonders if there's any point in taking it so seriously. I compared Nina to a jealous lover in episode 4, that her newfound love of their band made her worried about the others' fidelity to it. This time, I might compare Momoka to someone pining for an ex-lover. At times, she remembers why they were a lover in the first place, and at other times, she remembers why they became an ex. So even though Momoka herself is in comparatively little of this episode, this is the main thing I want to look at today. See, one way to read the episode is that the other four's actions and words are echoes of Momoka's own warring psyche during her last days with Diamond Dust and up to the present. Sometimes the others play her role, sometimes they play the rest of Diamond Dust. We can see the same interplay of convictions and compromises, the same questioning of their importance, and the same tension between the fear of change and the necessity of it. It's a rather great way to introduce the Beef Bowl girls, who thankfully finally have names. Tomo and Rupa have their own dynamic, but each has some overlap with our existing trio as well, which helps to rapidly characterize them, and I'll make those comparisons as well. There is also a doubling of the plot, where in the first part, Rupa is trying to coax Tomos towards making a decision and approach the others, while in the second part, Nina and Subaru try to coax Momoka towards a decision to accept them. The first comparison to make, then, is between Tomo and Momoka. In each group, these are the people who need to be on board for any plan to move forward, but they are also the two most apprehensive of change. Tomo's initial reluctance to do anything except continuing to make music as a duo is just like Momoko's own reluctance to choose anything like a goal. She just wants to keep up their routine, practicing when they can, making songs, and doing shows. Each is somewhat comfortable in the status quo, or at least is more afraid of where a change may lead. Each also had some incompatibility with the professional side of the industry. Momoka quitting her band over whatever she found so untenable, and Tomo unable to find an agency she found compatible. They were both uncompromising in the face of agency pressure, though I'm unsure how Momoka would be now. And both were also part of a four-piece band, presuming that that's what Tomo's picture with the reptile stickers is showing. From here, though, key differences emerge. While Momoka is the lone absent member of her original group, Tomo has Rupa sticking with her. I wondered last episode if things might be different for Momoka if just one more of the DD girls felt as she did. It's easier for her to conclude that she is in the wrong when everyone else was able to agree. While we don't know what happened with Tomo's group, she doesn't seem to have any second thoughts about her reaction to the agencies they met with, and she hasn't stopped trying to write and record new songs. And, in that, another important distinction between them. Tomo has a goal. Presumably it was the goal of their original four members, to play at the Budokan, but she has not relinquished it. And because she hasn't, she is more willing to entertain a shakeup than Momoka is, more willing to take a risk. The future holds less terror for her because there's a future she wants to see. By contrast, Momoka seems only to have a future that she wants to avoid. In that way, Momoka is like Nina was back at the beginning. Nina had no goal, no dream she was chasing, she just didn't want to lose. She wanted to avoid a future where she was only a high school dropout, which is what led her to the city and the cram school. Momoka's own insistence brought her into the band, and now Nina has goals for days. She adopts Tomo's goal at playing at the Budokan because it serves her goal of feeling like they weren't losing to Diamond Dust. And to do that means going pro, and to go pro means attracting an agency, and attracting an agency means boosting their visibility and popularity. And all that is in service of two other goals: to compete with her ex-friend in Diamond Dust, and to prove to everyone that Momoka wasn't wrong, that her songs were just as good. Nina and Rupa have overlap here, each a cheerleader for the songwriter in their group, wanting them to get to their due or climb to the heights they believe them capable of. But in that pursuit, Nina ends up on a surprising path, behaving like Diamond Dust. Once Subaru puts Nina's goal into words, to beat Diamond Dust, she explains the difficulty. They're pros with an agency behind them. To even the playing field, Nina researches the process by which one becomes a pro, and she must be motivated indeed to return to the venue owner for advice. He explains the shift towards contacting bands that are popular online, and so Nina takes that as the next step. Become more popular online. Thus will she suggest cuter outfits for their next show, or uploading pictures of Subaru mugging for the camera in her uniform. Even the intended joke of all of them wearing school uniforms has Nina considering a moment. When Subaru points out that this thinking is the same as the current Diamond Dust, Nina doesn't balk. This is kind of shocking in light of last episode. Nina hated how DD changed for mainstream appeal and accused her friend of being someone superficial. She picks their stage outfits specifically to proclaim their ugly truths, their authenticity, a challenge to the fabricated image of DD. How can this be the same Nina? The answer lies in the earlier part of the episode. After their time in the sauna, Nina and Subaru read out reactions to their performance. Momoka really is Diamond Dust. Her new band's way more rock than the current Diamond Dust. In conclusion, the audience likes the old Diamond Dust better. This felt like a triumph to Nina, and she waited for Momoka to feel the same because she wants Momoka to believe she made the right decision, that she wasn't wrong. And so, Momoka asks if she wants to make a post trashing DD as posers, asking others to support them because they're more authentic. Nina is surprised that she doesn't want to. But rather than explaining to Nina the reasons she's not interested in trashing her old band or even competing with them, she asks her to look at the difference in their followers. Nina believed that their authenticity in the face of DD's artifice meant they were winning, but now Momoka has reframed it in terms of popularity. I don't think it was Momoka's intent to do so, more like a way to shut Nina up, but Nina seemingly now believes that some other way is required to beat Diamond Dust and prove Momoka right. This ends up being a good example of why I think discerning character goals and the order of those goals is an important aspect of analysis. We might have believed that Nina cared the most about authenticity, about believing that their way is the right way, and so compromise isn't an option. She may indeed think that, and putting her real feelings into her performance is no doubt still a goal, but it turns out beating Diamond Dust is the higher goal in her own accounting, and so she's willing to use the same playbook to get there. I imagine a similar priority mismatch was at work in the old Diamond Dust dynamic. Momoka and the other three probably had similar goals, similar principles, and so long as they didn't have to choose between them, they could easily believe that they were all in sync. But when a conflict arose, the order of Momoka's priorities was different than the others, and so things went the way they did. As stubbornly uncompromising as Nina has seemed throughout the series, there is clearly a hierarchy to that stubbornness. Likewise, as much as Momoka may claim that DD's top goal was to keep the band together, the outcome says otherwise. We just don't yet know if it really was her or the others with the mismatch. Now, Nina will compromise a lower goal for the sake of a higher one, but she is still, in general, a very uncompromising black and white thinker. She digs in her heels, or else charges straight ahead, every much the bull Subaru accuses her of being. She's always convinced that she's right. That aspect of her we might instead compare to Momoka of the past, who likewise had some reason she quit Diamond Dust rather than accept whatever she was asked to do. That comparison is one of the more interesting ones to me, because the show is more likely to repudiate Nina for her dogmatic ways than it is to reward her. Take this episode, for example. She wants to beat Diamond Dust, both for her own grudge and as part of proving that Momoka wasn't wrong. Because of that, she'll present the reactions to their performance, convinced of victory, only to find Momoka unimpressed. When she suggests the cuter outfits and all that to build their followers with the goal of turning pro, Momoka wants to know when exactly that became their goal. They'll fight about it, and end with Momoka facing away from Nina, even further from being in alignment. When Rupa and Tomo approach them about joining up, Nina immediately wants to pitch the idea to Momoka, convinced it's the right move. Subaru has to talk her down and persuade her to try a different tack, one that ultimately does work. And so, if the way events unfold suggest Nina has the wrong approach, then what should we infer about Momoka's past decision? That her own unwillingness to compromise was likewise the wrong approach? I certainly suspect that's what's been going through her head, that whatever conviction she originally held has faded out, and this confused, sometimes sorrowful Momoka is what remains. Even their dynamic might call Momoka's methods into question. She was the prime instigator, shaping Nina into someone who would stop running away, and instilled in her the value of putting her real feelings into her words and song. And now, that version of Nina is the one who butts heads with her, and causes friction within the band. Maybe it feels right to hold fast to what you believe is true, but a band whose members never compromise will not be a band for very long. Like many good works, though, Girls Band Cry does not suggest a single answer to this tension between compromise and authenticity. As it happens, the authentic and honest parts of their performance seem to be the very things that resonated with Tomo. Nina had talked about wanting to make a mark with their performance, and in this episode, we see Toma circling back to a video of it repeatedly, picking out a keyboard accompaniment at one point, and seemingly daydreaming a bit while at work. When Rupa later explains why they approached them, she'll say they realized Nina's trio only sing what they want, that they'd voice their opinions. The notion that they would be uncompromising is thus treated as an asset rather than a liability. It's attractive enough to bring 2 new members into the fold. Nina's stubbornness also contributes. The actual exchange that prompts Tomo to approach them is the one she overhears between Subaru and Nina, which begins with Subaru questioning the desire to suddenly go pro. Nina admits that it's not that simple, and she isn't really convinced they'll beat Diamond Dust, but she hates admitting defeat and giving up from the start because they aren't wrong. Nina knows her conviction is unreasonable, but stubbornly holds to it all the same. Presumably, that also resonates with Tomo, and for all that this trait of Nina's has caused problems, in this instance, it tips things into their favor. But it wasn't these things alone. Rupa's efforts to persuade Tomo have been ongoing, starting all the way back in episode 3 when Momoka gave her their card. I've spoken about Subaru being the drummer of the band beyond just the instrument, that she seems to be the one most likely to help move things along or smooth things over. So I was, of course, interested to see if her fellow rhythm section counterpart would serve a similar function, and she does. Rupa purchased both their tickets to the show, and keeps a little pressure on Tomo throughout the first part of this episode, which I'll come right back to. When the 4 of them meet in the little cafe, and when they return to the apartment, Rupa does most of the talking, and smooths over some of Tomo's more prickly replies. Throughout it, she maintains a patient pleasantness, and it's rather obvious why she's the one who interacts with customers at the beef bowl spot. Returning to her pressure on Tomo then, like I said, we have a doubling of the plot when it comes to convincing the key members in each grouping to work together. It's interesting then that the 3 doing the convincing all have different ways of going about it. Nina wants to charge right at Momoka, wanting to call her as soon as they've met with Rupa and Tomo, wants to tell her the entire truth after Momoka listens to their work, and immediately admits their intent to join up as soon as the jam session is over. Subaru, with great effort and some karate chops, convinces Nina to let her try a different way. Going back to the idea of 2 Momokas, Subaru knows she has to make the pitch to the musician, and so obscures the end goal with a little half-truth and arranges with the others to play the song from the concert. Nina would plunge into the bush after her prey with spear in hand, while Subaru would rather find tempting bait and disguise a trap. Nina chooses truth and aggression as her approach, while Subaru prefers deception and patience. Rupa, then, is a mix of these. The things she says to Tomo are truths, like her desire to find a vocalist that can sing a melody Tomo wrote, and her own desire to try forming with the others. She'll voice the thoughts she believes Tomo is having, a fear over losing what they have, a preference for the status quo over potential suffering, but will remind her that keeping up the poster proclaiming the Budokan goal is absurd if she wants to stay that way. And when Tomo asks her if she thinks it'll work out, she doesn't give hollow reassurances. She doesn't know, as close friends can split up, and incompatible types can somehow stay together, though she does believe the other 3 are a good fit for her. So, truths like Nina, but patience and diplomacy like Subaru. She brings it up and touches it often, but is content to let Tomo get to an answer in her own time. So, in allowing these different strategies to meet with success, the story also isn't picking a winner, a right or wrong way to be when in pursuit of a goal. Yet achieving that goal isn't the end of things. How does Momoka really feel is still an unanswered question by the end of the episode. In fact, it's exactly what I'm wondering as we linger on her in the last moments. If I'm understanding correctly, the festival they are aiming towards will also be attended by Diamond Dust. The chance of a meeting between Momoka and her former bandmates is hanging tensely in the air. And Momoka is out there alone, heavy in her thoughts. A light stream of purple lines seems to blow inwards with the wind, reminding me of the colored lines in the 5-person practice session. In that context, it seems to represent the wall of sound, Nina's perception of the fullness and variety of the music played by a full complement of instruments. Then, it was myriad colors, solid lines, energetic movement. But now, from Momoka, there is one color only, solitary, and not only are their lines slower and comparatively listless, they are at times broken into smaller fragments. They have formed this 5-person band, presumably have taken yet another step towards being a recognized and successful group, but the last scene suggests no unification at all. I wasn't even aware Momoka was in the scene until the end, as she isn't just standing apart from the rest, she's outside of the apartment. And within the apartment, the groups are split as well. Rupa and Tomo in one room, with Nina and Subaru in the other. Now, if we keep up the pattern of the series so far, then next episode should end with another performance. If so, presumably it is these 5 at said festival. And in fact, even if that's not in the next episode, it seems to be where we're headed. To this point, all of the performances have been a victory of some kind or another. The first one introduces Nina as a singer and stops Momoka from leaving town. The second one empowers Nina towards becoming someone who can speak her truth and feel confident in performing. And the third one demonstrates their chops as a band, in a real concert environment with a discerning crowd. But should we assume that all the performances will be a success of one kind or another? And, if not disaster, could they sometimes be a mixed blessing? I don't think Momoka wants to run into Diamond Dust at all. Whatever went down severed some real ties. Remember that there was no one to see her off for her last night in town. Whether there is actual bad blood or it's just a case of crushing guilt, I believe Momoka would rather be invisible wherever Diamond Dust is concerned. I believe her when she says she doesn't hold a grudge, but I also think she isn't really interested in beating them in any manner. I can actually imagine that she wants them to succeed, because then at least her turmoil would have served a useful purpose. If she quits and they fail, then what did this pain accomplish? If Momoka thought she made the right choice, then it's different. She could believe that their failure after compromising proved her convictions right. And if she could prove successful in another band with no such compromises, then it would prove doubly so. That is certainly Nina's mindset in all this, but it's not what Momoka seems to believe. I think she's fond of her former friends and bandmates, feels guilty over whatever transpired, and would never want to succeed at their expense. Thus, at this festival, there is the potential both for Nina to run into her ex-friend and Momoka to run into her ex-bandmates, and any such encounter could prove disruptive to their performance. Since our fivesome is the one with something to prove, this is far riskier for them, and yet Nina's bullish competitiveness doesn't take that sort of calculus into account. This episode, on paper, should feel like the final assembling of the team, something victorious, and instead, all I feel is apprehension over what comes next. And that's really down to, well, goals. It's most of what we talked about, but to recap, Tomo had a goal of playing at the Budokan, and Rupa basically supports her towards that end. Nina adopts that goal herself as a means of achieving her desire to feel like they weren't losing to Diamond Dust. Subaru just likes to bang on drums, and so she's amenable to doing it on such an auspicious stage, but Momoka specifically has no goals. It's a telling scene when the other 4 make the impromptu visit to the Budokan, their visions aligning, while Momoka isn't just absent, she's unaware the other 2 are anything but the Beef Bowl girls. But those without goals will be dragged along by those who have them, and in this case, towards something I think she wants to avoid. Which, then, is what I would add in conflicts. A potential interaction between Momoka and Diamond Dust feels like a powder keg awaiting a spark. A potential interaction between Nina and her ex-friend is like a finger hovering over a nuclear launch button. They need this festival opportunity to boost their chances of attracting an agency and everything that would enable, but attendance is fraught with peril. I will make another note here, too, the background conflict of Subaru living a lie. We got a little bit showing that she uses a stage name, a playa-chan, and she does so since she can't have her grandmother finding out. Touching that fear again means we should keep it in mind. When Tomo ends up being a huge fan, and seemingly putting it together with Subaru's last name, then we can probably downright count on it coming to a head at some point. Though I guess I could say here that my broad expectations for the series is that there's no way these 5 are still together at the end. I just don't yet know which stressors or priorities will form the details. In characterization, a lot of work went into the initial picture of Tomo and Rupa. It's consistent with the small bits we'd gotten before, but helping us understand how they relate to the subject of music is an important element to integrate them into the overall story. I thus rather like that the episode does not rush right into their fateful meeting right away, saving it until somewhere after the halfway point. Seeing their two-person interactions and what it looks like when they work on music together gives us something to compare with their dynamic when our original trio is added on. Like normal, though, a lot of what I've talked about is characterization, so we're not going to repeat all of it here. In world building, there are some interesting data points shared for perspective. Our trio's one performance has earned them an online following of around 500, though dropping. Diamond Dust is at 20,000 and evidently on the ascent. The venue owner says they were around 10,000 in their indie band days, so I assume a lot of that climb is recent and due to the visibility afforded by their agency. Alongside that, Beni Shoga, Tomo and Rupa's little group, has an online following of 22,738. That's higher than Diamond Dust as of this moment, though I expect that to change. However, since they don't draw a crowd by their own admission, this seems like the result of a dedicated effort towards their online presence. They'd had some kind of viral hit that Nina and Subaru recognized, after all. I wonder then if their savvy in this arena will be a difference maker in the pursuit of their goals. Pairing that experience with the ability to put on a charismatic, full-band live performance might make the prospect of competing with Diamond Dust a little less of a pipe dream. Subaru also helpfully exposits the advantages of festivals, another way to get on a producer's radar to go with the previous explanation of online popularity. It seems like we introduced multiple paths toward success and multiple tools to pursue those paths. Now they just need to choose a name. In theme, then, I want to reiterate the making a mark idea from last time. I saw that as an expansion of the ongoing conversation around a song's impact, what goes into it, and what individually takes out of it. Nina channels that desire to make a mark into her performance, and in this episode we see Tomo repeatedly coming back to their song. Since they later explain about the sense of Nina's group saying what they want and voicing their opinions as why they were interested, it sounds like someone got out of the song exactly what Nina was trying to put into it. In contrast, though, I talked last time about the tension between authenticity and fabrication, with our trio and Diamond Dust representing the idea, respectively. This time, Nina is happy to abandon that version of authenticity if it means competing. And while coming straight out to tell Momoka about the other two would be the more authentic way of trying to bring them together, it's a more circuitous and fabricated method that wins the day. It's an interesting counternote to Toma and Rupa finding them an attractive option because they perceived their honest messaging. Humans are complicated, it turns out. Finally, in one way or another, each of these five is driven by some event or choice in their past, and there's a sense of drawing increasingly close to a reckoning. Subaru and the live acting school, Nina and her ex-friend, Momoka and Diamond Dust, and the new pair with their past goal towards the Budokan. Interestingly, all of these could interact with one another, or even culminate simultaneously, and I think each has both very good and very bad potential outcomes. In the interim, however, the way they influence the behavior and choices of each member is a big part of the churn in their relationships. The longer they perch unresolved, it seems, the greater the potential fallout. And so with that, I will wrap things up for the week and sit with great apprehension towards the next. Bye, guys.